are talking vampire movie Jakob's Wife. This one is directed by Travis Stevens and stars horror icon Barbara Crampton, along with Larry Fessenden and Bonnie Aaran, who you may know as the nun Valak from the Conjuring series. So, a vampire movie, and this is a story of this husband and wife. The husband is a minister in a local church, and his wife, played by Barbara Crampton, is this kind of like mouse-like, devoted wife who really is kind of unhappy in her marriage. The husband isn't overtly aggressive or abusive or anything like that, but kind of pretty much dominates her life, and she's just a little bit fed up. An opportunity comes her way to kind of get some business with a kind of an old flame, and she meets this old flame in this kind of dilapidated old mill that they're kind of intending to kind of do up. However, it happens that there is a vampire living in this old mill that bites Barbara Crampton's character, turning her into a vampire. And what will happen next? Well, you'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss what I think works in this movie. Apparently this was a long time in development and somewhat of a passion project for Barbara Crampton, who also serves as producer on the movie. I have to say, Crampton is very good in the role, and she is quite transformative in the way that her character comes across. As we see in the beginning of the film, you know, she's kind of looking somewhat kind of more aged and kind of tired and just kind of downbeat. But as she, you know, gets this kind of new life thanks to this vampire type virus, she seems more invigorated both in her performance and physically, obviously down to kind of makeup and everything. But nonetheless, I think Barbara Crampton is very good in the role, as are the majority of the other cast. I thought the dynamic with the husband is very interesting, because you initially expect to dislike him, because he comes across as a kind of typical kind of stuffy sort of church, you know, minister who is really just kind of more interested in that than anything else. But I have to say I enjoyed the direction that they took his character as well. So I thought the acting, for the most part, with one kind of exception, which we'll come on to, was very good. The story is interesting because there's not a hugely big narrative here. I mean, this is more of a kind of very localized sort of story without really kind of much in the way of stakes necessarily. I wouldn't say. And as such, it's kind of like more of the kind of the day of the life of these kind of characters and how they're kind of dealing with this problem. And this presents both a positive and negative. A positive because it has a very kind of unique sort of indie-ish kind of feel to it, where we're kind of really just seeing the kind of the nuts and bolts of how this couple are having to kind of deal with this kind of this vampire issue that is surrounding them in their kind of local community, and obviously their marriage, which I actually found quite intriguing. And again, that is driven by great character work from our central kind of two actors. The movie also has an interesting tonal shift as we go through the film, because it starts off quite seriously and kind of quite a seemingly a dramatic sort of style kind of horror. But as the film progresses, the tone actually lightens and becomes more of a kind of a horror comedy as we kind of go on. And when we get to the climax really of the film, it's almost spoof level like in some of the kind of the sequences. Again, I'm going to come on to that in just a second there. But nonetheless, you know, it was an interesting kind of like sort of change of pace, because normally, you know, you'll have comedic stuff happen in the beginning and then the stakes will raise as you kind of go through the movie, you know, obviously because the danger level is meant to be that's bigger. So normally with these horror comedies you have a bit more of a dramatic and the kind of the latter kind of like section of the movie, but this is the other way around. So it's a little bit kind of an interesting take. And I also quite liked the Nosferatu kind of style vampire aesthetic here, and kind of there are some kind of scenes here that work pretty well, both in a comedic sense and in a kind of a horror sense as well, because there are scenes here where there is some pretty explicit kind of gore sequences and kills and things like that, but at the same time there's some sort of quite funny comedic elements as well. But what doesn't work in this film, as I've kind of alluded to, I think that the tone of this movie is a little bit divisive, I would suggest, because it becomes a little bit too goofy at times. The sequence involving, towards the end of the movie, we get a sequence involving the master vampire, played by Bonnie Aarons, and I've got to say, it's like ridiculously silly, to be honest. There's a sequence, and I don't want to go too much into the spoil, it is towards the end, but it's just like weirdly kind of like, you almost feel like you're watching a kind of like a Naked Gun style kind of parody movie. It's just bizarre in the way that they handle the kind of like the tone, considering it started off as a very sort of straight, dramatic kind of horror film with, you know, with kind of gruesome kills and things like this, and where it ends up. I mean, the comedy isn't kind of consistent throughout, and some of it I think works as more sort of situational comedy, but there are times here, and it's even little things like the weird little kind of like whooshy sound effects where when people are kind of like, you know, waving their hands around and it's like woo woo woo. I don't know, it's just weird. So the tone to me, I feel, was a little bit divisive, and I don't think works. Maybe it strays a little bit too far. It could have been reined in, or it needed to have a little bit more of a middle ground, I think. I have to say as well, the story's narrative, to me, I had a few problems with. Because, for example, Barbara Crampton's character, she ultimately becomes infected with this vampire virus. But I wasn't really sure how sort of conscious she was of what was kind of going on. Because when we first see her, the very first time we see her as a kind of, as a kind of a vampire, or turning into a vampire, she seems like not to kind of question anything really that's kind of changed within her life. She just kind of does things, and I was expecting her to kind of go, what am I doing? Why am I sticking fingers in blood and stuff like that? But she just does it without kind of questioning it. And I think, well, maybe it's like a different personality. Maybe kind of like, now she's a vampire, it's kind of like, you know, some type of other sort of personality. But it isn't the case, because we see her with her husband kind of later on trying to kind of like have like proper conversations as a couple and things like that. So to me, the kind of the narrative in regards to telling the story about this journey, this arc that Barbara Crampton's going on, didn't really work to me, because I didn't think the movie did a good enough job of letting us know some of the psychology of the character about how sort of conscious she is about what's going on, and you know, and she seems to accept stuff straight away, and it's only later she seems to kind of like have more questions on it, when she's almost becoming more, you know, more involved with the kind of the vampire and stuff like that. I've got to say as well, as much as I thought Crampton and the guy who plays her husband did a good job, Bonnie Aarons, to me, was not very good as this kind of lead vampire. And that goes in the way the film was kind of written and shot, so there's kind of like these goofy elements. But that whole master vampire, the performance, the way the character is written, shot, and then the makeup, it really isn't very good, I don't think. There are some sequences before we kind of see the master vampire in her full glory, where I think it does seem a little more menacing. But when we do see that character, like I said, that's when the movie goes into its most spoofy. I did not think the performance was particularly good, and kind of seemed like it was from a parody film, like a kind of, you know, an Airplane sort of style film, something along the lines of that. So yeah, I mean, it kind of was an interesting and somewhat bizarre film in a way. I did like it. I will give this an above average mark of a 6 out of 10, but I didn't really think it was kind of particularly consistent. So it's a 6 out of 10 for me. What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.